Welcome back to our summary study of the Brhad Bhagavatamrta. We are currently in chapter 6, and in this chapter we'll also be in two parts because it is a very long chapter. This chapter is called The Attainment of All Desires. This chapter is where Gopa-kumāra finally meets Kṛṣṇa, and then he shares the pastimes that he has with Kṛṣṇa to the Mathura Brahmin. We left off with chapter 5. It says that filled with the highest ecstasy from hearing from Nanda, Gopa-kumāra seemed to lose conscience in Dwarka. When he opened his eyes, he was back in this grove. He starts describing the different activities he did while back in Gokul. He said he went around and saw the different pastimes of Krishna's holy places. And he said he sang about them and he meditated about them, and this increased his ecstasy. And at times, when he was even just talking about this, he became emotional and he was a little embarrassed in front of this Mathura Brahmin, revealing some of his inner feelings of his heart. He said he spent the days and nights in great distress, not knowing if this practice would lead him to the happiness or into an ocean of distress. I couldn't tell whether I was living in the flames of a forest fire or in the supreme nectar of the clear, cool water of the Yamuna. So one day, while immersed in an ocean of weeping, he fell unconscious. And then the Supreme Lord, Madan Gopal, he appeared there and personally brought Gopa-kumāra back to consciousness. He wiped the dust from his limbs with his right lotus hand. When Gopa-kumāra comes back to consciousness, he sees the Lord of they so long cherished, the meditation of his 10-syllable mantra. And he gets up and he reaches out to grab a hold of the Lord's cloth. But the Lord sidesteps, playing his flute. He spins around and then disappears into the grove. Unable to see the Lord any longer, Gopa-kumāra fainted again. And this time he fell into the Yamuna, and the current carried him away. And then he awoke and he saw that he was being transported by another airplane. And this airplane is bringing him to Goloka. And he goes into the spiritual world and he sees Vaikuntha. And he goes by Ayodhya. And he also goes by Dwarka. And eventually he makes it to Mathura. Coming to Mathura, he hears that Kṛṣṇa is on the throne, and that citizens, they were afraid to enjoy freely. And so Gopa-kumāra, also feeling afraid, immediately left that place and headed for Vrindavan. Making his way to Vrindavan, he saw an elderly woman picking flowers. And he saw other people walking around, and they seemed different, as if someone had stolen their hearts and left them helpless in love. And so but the appearance he's getting from them is that their mind is somewhere else, that they're fixed on somebody who's not there. So I asked him a question, but he got no response. Moving here and there, I continued to ask questions of those I saw, and still I got no response. He couldn't discern whether the people were all enjoying the highest bliss or suffering in the grip of a terrible misery. In the distance, he saw a town adorned with the essence of all sweetness. And so he started approaching that town, and he came to the gate. And when he got to the gate, he saw an elderly gentleman sitting there, weeping and crying, "Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa." And with some effort, he was able to speak to this person. And he asked him with a choked voice, he said, "What place is this?" And that gentleman said that this was the town of Kṛṣṇa's father, Nanda, the king of the cows. And as soon as Gopa-kumāra heard that, he fainted. And then an elderly gentleman brought him back to consciousness. And then Gopa-kumāra ran down the path closer to the gate. And he asked an elderly lady there, "Where is Nanda? Where's he playing at today?" And she said, "He's deep into the forest, but very soon it is time for him to come back." So Gopa-kumāra sat down there and looked down that path with one pointed attention. And then at one point he heard a sound very far away. He says that mixed with the mooing of cows, it was the supremely attractive murmur of Kṛṣṇa's enchanting flute. That sound, sweet melodies of sportingly playful notes, diverse with musical embellishments, was like nothing I'd ever heard in the material world. Its attractive force at once overwhelmed everyone in the cowherd village. And then people starts coming out. There were people already there, but more and more people started coming to the path to greet Kṛṣṇa and the cowherd boys. Some of the gopis, they were carrying with them different articles. They had like garlands and sweet fragrances. Some carried trays of puja articles and paraphernalia. So Gopa-kumāra says that from a distance I saw him, his charming flute in his hand. Running quickly, he emerged from among his friends and animals and approached me, saying in a sweet voice, "Look, Sridham, here he is, my dear friend Svarup, the sun who shines on the lotus of your family." Kṛṣṇa was dressed for the forest. His garments, earrings, and peacock feather crown all swayed to and fro, and so did the garland of kadamba flowers. Fragrance perfumed all directions, and his beautiful lotus face blossomed with a playful smile. His lotus eyes beamed with a merciful glance, and the varied assets of beauty decorated him in an extraordinary way. The fingers of his lotus hand busily pushed back the locks of his hair, which flew about adorned with the dust raised by the cows. He leaped forward and came close to me, compelled by the affection of his helpless devotee. I fainted from the prema on seeing him, and he caught hold of me by the neck, and suddenly he too fell to the ground. A moment later, I awoke and carefully freed my neck from his grasp, and I stood up and saw him on the ground in a faint, moistening the dust-covered path with his tears. As people are approaching, they see this scene, and they see Kṛṣṇa is falling on the ground, and they don't really know who this other person is. He's kind of a new person. So the gopis are thinking, is this somebody sent from Kamsa? Who is he? What is he doing here? So these types of thoughts were going through their mind. So then the more cowherds, they came, and they saw Kṛṣṇa, and they also began to cry. Nanda comes, and he also begins to cry. It says the animals and the birds were stunned, and they also began to cry. Then Balaram quickly arrived there from a distance. And it says that Lord Balabhadra, the most skillful of persons, cried for a moment, but then seemed to regain his composure and looked all around with great care and attention. And he made me hold his younger brother by the neck with my arms. Suddenly Kṛṣṇa opened his eyes, sealed then by the flood of tears. Seeing me, he joyfully embraced and kissed me. But then he looked around and became embarrassed. So at the insistence of Nanda, he brought Balaram and Kṛṣṇa home. And Kṛṣṇa brought me to his mother and had me offer respects to her. And then more gopis, they started to show up at Kṛṣṇa's house. Mother Yasoda and Rohini were getting ready to bathe Kṛṣṇa and his brother. But when Lord Kṛṣṇa saw this, being eager to play with the gopis, said to his mother, "Dear mothers, we brothers are very hungry, so please make some rice and send for our father and feed us right away." And the gopis, they speak up and saying, "Yes, go cook. We will take care of bathing Kṛṣṇa. We will give him a proper bath." Yasoda said, "Bathe the older one first and then send him after Nanda." So they prepared to give Kṛṣṇa a bath and asked for his flute as they were doing this. The gopis always want Kṛṣṇa's flute. They're jealous of Kṛṣṇa's flute because it steals the nectar of his lips. They feel it's meant only for them. But he took the flute and he threw it to Sarup, and Sarup caught it. Said they smeared oil on him and removed it with their soft hands. And while bathing him, Kṛṣṇa, out of naughtiness, started to make sounds like he was being hurt. And his mother heard this and came out. And I said, "What's going on? What happened?" And then with Kṛṣṇa smiling and laughed, she returned back into the house and continued to cook. The gopis were laughing too, but yet afraid. And they started to sing as they finished Kṛṣṇa's massage. Next, they playfully bathed him with warm, clear, fragrant water, carried from the Yamuna in jewel-studded vessels and small clay pots. They dressed him like an actor and decorated him the way he liked, with clothes, jewelry, wonderful garlands, and perfume pastes, all brought from their homes. When the gopis saw Nanda, the king of the cowherds, had taken his bath and arrived with Balaram, they all speedily disappeared, and Kṛṣṇa and Nanda and Balaram, they went into the house. So Nanda, he sits down, and Kṛṣṇa sits down on his left, and Balaram sits down on his right, and Gopa-kumāra Sarup, he sits in front, along with some other cowherd boys. Now, some of the gopis, they also brought sweets for Yasoda to give to Kṛṣṇa. And Radharani, she came, and she brought with her these Manohar ladus, very expert-made ladus. But Kṛṣṇa, in his playful mood, he picks up one of these ladus, and he takes it and he touches it to the tip of his tongue and acts like it's sour like neem, and he makes a funny face, and he throws a few of them to Gopa-kumāra. After he ate, Kṛṣṇa washed his mouth, and Mother Yasoda rubbed his belly to make sure that the digestion process would be done properly. And then he played outside for a short while, and then Mother Yasoda called him in because it was time for him to take rest. And so a few of his friends came in to his bedroom, and his bedroom is described in text 139. A splendid canopy draped with strings of pearls further enhanced the beauty of that bed, which stood in a room fragrant with argo incense, whose beautiful side rooms were built with many valuable gems. A palatial room that excelled all others, as the lion excels all the animals. His friends and some gopis stayed for a short period of time, and then they all went home. Sridham, he came, and with some effort, he brought Sarup back to his house. Sarup was disturbed all night. He couldn't sleep at all his first night at Goloka. And as soon as it became morning, he got up and he rushed over to Kṛṣṇa's house. And when he saw Kṛṣṇa, still it was in bed, and he saw signs of conjugal enjoyment. Mother Yasoda also saw this, but she was thinking, "Oh, Kṛṣṇa, he got scratched by the thorns in the deep forest while playing with his friends." After waking him up, she bathed him and dressed him for that day. Kṛṣṇa took the lunch his mother gave him and headed off playing his flute. His friends, they all came and they all joined him, and now they're all heading back to the forest. Mother Yasoda followed him to the outer gate. At his request, she turned back, but after a few steps, she came back to Kṛṣṇa. She gave him some pan and then turned back home. Once again, she turned back and came to Kṛṣṇa again. She fed him some fruits and then turned back, but after a few steps, she turned around and came back to him again. She looked over and gave him some instructions and then returned toward home only to come back again. She says to him, "My dear child, don't go too far into the woods." She once again turned to go home, and she took a few steps and yet came back. This is already like 6 times. She's having a very difficult time letting go. Then she turns to Balaram. She says, "My dear Ram, you stay in front of your younger brother, and you, Sridham, stay behind your friend Kṛṣṇa with Sarup. You, Amsu, should stay on Kṛṣṇa's right, and you, Subal, on his left." Straw between her teeth, she employed the boys with such request. Then she looked intently at her son. In this way, Mother Yasoda, anxiously going back and forth again and again, showed more love than a cow who had just given birth to a calf. Her son then bowed down to her, took hold of her feet and embraced her. And with various rationales, and finally with the words of insistence of his own, with great effort, he made her turn back. And he continues on, and some of the gopis, they continued to follow. But then Kṛṣṇa, through a trusted messenger and some gestures, had them stop also. So as he continued on, Nanda Maharaj also continued to go with Kṛṣṇa into the forest. And at one point, Kṛṣṇa bowed down to Nanda and reminded him of the many duties that he had. Nanda stood there until Kṛṣṇa went deep into the forest. He stayed there until he could no longer able to see Kṛṣṇa, and then he returned. In the places around Govardhan, he enjoyed tending the cows and making them drink water from the Yamuna. As evening approached, the Lord of Raja returned to his cowherd village and later played with Raja's young girls. So that's where we're going to end the first part of chapter 6. And we'll continue with our next video. Finish chapter 6, which is more pastimes of Kṛṣṇa. Some pastimes we've already heard in Kṛṣṇa book, like him fighting with Kaliya, but they have a little bit of a twist. They're not exactly the same pastimes. And there are a couple other little pastimes, and even Akura coming and taking Kṛṣṇa. I hope you come back and hear the rest of chapter 6. Hare Kṛṣṇa.
Thank you.